Good evening. I'd like to call the regular school committee meeting to order, today being Tuesday, May 24th, 2016. The matters listed below are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed on the agenda may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. The meeting today is being recorded by the Peabody School Committee's recording secretary, today Marge Macarelli. And I'd like to start off the meeting, if everybody could please stand for a moment of silence, and then we'll follow that up with the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a number of minutes for approval.
Make a motion to approve May 10th, 2016 budget meeting. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mr. Rosignol for approval of the minutes from the budget meeting of May 10th, 2016, seconded by Mr. Hockman. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Make a motion to approve May 10th, 2016 regular school committee meeting minutes. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion made by Mr. Rosignol for approval of the regular school committee meeting minutes of May 10th, 2016, seconded by Mr. Amico. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you,
And
Mr. Rosignol.
And
Yep.
lastly, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of May 17th, 2016 budget meeting. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mr. Rosignol for approval of the budget meeting minutes of May 17th, 2016, seconded by Mr. Hockman. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Mr. Mayor, I move to approve warrant 3049 in the amount of $716,789.45, subject to audit.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hockman. You've heard the motion for approval of warrant 3049, seconded by Mr. Rosignol. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 And Mr. Mayor, I move to approve warrant 3050 in the amount of $102,583.05, subject to audit.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman for approval of warrant 3050, seconded by Mr. Rosignol. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Great, thank you. Next item is continued business. Anything new to report, Mrs. Dunn, on the MSBA Higgins project that you wanted to share today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The monthly meeting was held last Thursday at 4 p.m. at the Kiley School. Those present were treated to a wonderful slideshow, and one of the big features is that the floor is in at the gym, and that the Peabody Tanner logo has already been applied to that gym floor, and it looks beautiful. So the members were very, very pleased to see that. The funding, the money, the budget, everything is still on track. Timing is on track. We will be obtaining keys soon. Furniture has been ordered and it will be delivered shortly. And plans are continuing for the numerous celebrations and various tours that will be taking place in the future, so that everyone around will be able to see that beautiful building. And there are also plans in the works for occasions where families will be able to come to see the school and students will be able to be familiarized with the school. So that's all pending, and those dates will be out soon.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Next item, public participation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward and speak on a topic? The microphone is open. Seeing none, we'll go to, we actually have 4 requested reports. First is from Bay State Textiles, their report to us. Second is student attendance. Third is teacher attendance. And 4 is hiring status reports. Any questions or comments? I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Levine, before we do that.
Thank you. Just quickly on the hiring report, I did want the school committee to know that now that you have approved the budget, we have started the process of gathering resumes, and we will start interviewing for positions, first of all, for positions that we know we have available because of retirements, and secondly, for positions that we anticipate having available pending approval of the budget by the City Council. So we want to jump into the pool of candidates early and make sure that we have people ready to offer jobs to once the City Council hires. So we have approves. So we have begun the process of gathering resumes and interviewing for anticipated openings as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions on any of the reports presented today? Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Bay State Textiles report, would it be possible at sometime in the future if we could get a report on how much money is being saved from our, I can't remember what the word is, the fee, by diverting the amount of textiles out of our landfills? I know that there is some money being saved, and I think that if people realized how much is being saved, it might help them to be encouraged to even contribute more to that Bay State textile project. Is that something that we would request from, I'm assuming it would be from City Hall, if someone could give us that figure?
I think that's a good suggestion. I'm sure there's a way that that can be determined. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go now to Superintendent's report. Dr. Levine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your packet, you should have received my evaluation document, my self-evaluation document, along with a reminder of what the goals were that I had for this year. I could have been much more inclusive, but it would have taken weeks to talk about the things that I've accomplished. So rather than do that, I've limited the exposure for you.
We appreciate that greatly. Yeah. Comments on Dr. Levine's, on his comments. Mr. Rosignol.
Thank you, through the
There's
chair.
a humility clause on this page, right?
Besides Dr. Levine's humility and his humble nature, I do want to be sincere for one moment. I do want to thank you for the year that you've had between your vision, your stability, and your communication and your teamwork. It's been a breath of fresh air. I've really enjoyed you as the superintendent this past year. Look forward to working with you again next year. And I just want to publicly say thank you for your vision this year between you and Ms. Murtagh, and leading us to not only good things this year, but things in the future, whether it's the science curriculum or technology or just the vision and the direction that you're really pulling our district into. You need to be applauded, you and Ms. Murtagh both. So I want to just publicly thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
You
it.
really played into That was that was great. Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question concerns time frame. What time are we looking at as far as completing the evaluation and submitting it? Would we use the usual process? What we have done in the past would be committee members complete their evaluation, submit it to the mayor's office where everything is compiled, and then there is a summary document.
Yeah, that's I leave it up to the members as to how much time you would like in order to put together your evaluations to give to me to do a summary. What would be fair? 3 weeks, maybe?
Through the chair to the board, I was thinking next school committee meeting. That'll give us a 2-week time frame to get it done. I'm comfortable with that, but I'm open to any suggestions.
Mrs. Dunn?
I'm sorry. I was actually thinking of the same thing. The only consideration we would need to do, though, is to have it prepared for the next school committee meeting. We would need to back it back a few days for the compilation. So if, probably.
Everybody comfortable with that time frame?
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? If you can get the evaluations to me by next Friday, we'll have that for the, we'll have those received at that time, at the next committee meeting. Great.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
It's a question for Mrs. Maccarelli. We know that someone in the mayor's office will need to compile them, but speaking on their behalf, is it easier for a hard copy to be sent in, or should we try to do this online and submit those via email? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Levine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just very quickly, you have end-of-the-year events report for you, a calendar of events and performing arts events. We're trying to limit the conflicts as much as possible next year. We hope we will have a central calendar in place so that you folks particularly don't have to worry about school committee meetings and other big events in the school district at the same time. DA Blodgett stopped by my office this afternoon, and delivered a $17,000 check to be used to refurbish the new office that will be used by the new substance abuse coordinator, and it will be furnished and the appropriate equipment will be in there. I want to publicly once again thank DA Blodgett, who not only personally delivered the check and personally vouched for the city of Peabody and our efforts with substance abuse, but also has come up with a couple of other items for us to explore for next year, which I will fill you in with as soon as we get a better handle on what that might be. But he has been a good friend, both personally and professionally, and I just want to thank DA Blodgett and his office very much for helping the city of Peabody and its residents, and particularly its kids, with the resources of his office.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Mrs. Dunn?
If I may. Thank you, Dr. Levine. I want to thank you and the district attorney for this project. I think it's so valuable to our students. And I also want to thank you because you made me remember there was a correction I wanted to make in the minutes. It was in discussion about the location of the counseling center, and I had mentioned looking into the possibility of an entrance coming through the clinic. And in our minutes, it says through the nurse's office, which is at a totally different location. If everyone would indulge me with that one correction in the minutes, it would make it much clearer someday down in the line.
I think that's a fine suggestion. Everybody in favor? Thank you, Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you. Marge, I don't know what page it's on.
And lastly, Mr. Mayor, I would invite, I have two of our wonderful principals here to very quickly talk a little bit about the Buddy Bench project. So I would invite Ms. Metropolis and Ms. Alfanos to join us. Right there.
Welcome to the both of you. If you could just please
Thank you, Mrs.
introduce
Song.
yourself.
What? Can you hear me? Okay, so I'm very happy to come before you tonight along with my colleague, Jackie Orfanos. And we know that you're very busy, but we're very happy that Dr. Levine, we both put in for this particular thing at our schools, and he feels it's worthy enough for to come before you. So we'd like to just take a couple of minutes of your time to tell you about it. Why don't you start, Jackie?
So we're here to talk about the same product, which is called a Buddy Bench. And it came to me really as part of a legacy. I don't know many of you who might know, but Julie Fleming was a fabulous center school teacher who passed on last year. And her dear friends, Karen McCafferty and Marge Ryan, approached me earlier this year and said, could we have a meeting? We ended up having a breakfast meeting. And I knew or had a feeling that they wanted to do something in honor of their friend, but I had no idea what they were about to ask me. And the story behind it is quite nice. So again, the Buddy Bench, the purpose is to have it in the schoolyard, and it's available for kids who either don't have the social skills to ask to play with someone, or maybe not have the language, as we know many ESL students, but it's a signal to peers on the playground, I don't have anyone to play with, and I don't know how to ask. And I'm going to have Elaine speak more about that, but the piece that really touched me, actually, brought me to tears, is when the lady shared that when Julie's last year working, she was using oxygen regularly, but she loved recess duty. She loved it so much that she wanted to do it every week, and it was something that was so important. So in memory of her friend, they really wanted to have this out there, and I just thought it was just beautiful. And it also is very much in alignment with my vision for the school, continuing to develop kids' social skills, character education, and so both Principal Metropolis and I will be really rolling this into regular school counseling meetings with our school adjustment counselors and guidance counselors, our monthly school meetings, and recognizing kids who not only use it, but teach the kids how to use it. And I'm going to let Principal Metropolis explain more.
So this was actually the idea of a second grader, not in our state, and he went to his principal and he said, sometimes I'm outside by myself and I don't have anyone to play with at recess, so this is my idea. And of course, this very wise principal said, that's fabulous, let's do it. And that's how it started. Actually, it was the brain of a second grade child. So I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to watch kids playing at recess, but it's really heartbreaking if you see a child who's all alone, doesn't have anyone to play with, doesn't know how to ask, or is turned away. Can I play? No, the team's already full. We can't. No, we're doing this. And in elementary school, we have such a short recess time that when the kids go out, they want to get out. They want to start their game. They want to play. And they're not looking around to see who's left out. They're not really thinking of those things. They're thinking, I want to play. I want to burn my energy off and have fun with my friends. So what this bench is, and picture a bench. It can be painted pretty colors. It can have the word Buddy Bench on it. It just looks like a regular bench. The bench is not important. How it's painted is not important. Bright colors are great. But it's a signal for the kids. And they know if I go sit on that bench, everyone who sees me on that bench knows they come over and ask me, do you want to play? Do you want to join our game? It's very important. It's not so much that we put a bench out there and paint it pretty colors. It's about educating the students. What does it mean? If you see somebody on that bench, you go over and you ask, do you want to play? It's important for kids to be aware of other kids and how they're feeling, and we don't ever want to leave anybody out. It's not a good feeling. So, Mrs. Orfanos and I would like to bring these to our schools, and our school in particular, the Brown School, as you know, we have a lot of special education students. We're a very inclusive environment, and we want kids everywhere in our school to feel welcomed, to feel part of the community, and we're well on our way of doing that. But we had a fundraiser. We sold after our autism awareness rally, we sold Autism Awareness is Blooming at the Brown bracelets for $1. And so now we have enough to buy our Buddy Bench. So we're really excited, and I thank you so much for this opportunity. Mrs. Orfanos and I are really excited to bring this to our schools, and hopefully it will catch on and many of the other schools will join in. Thank you.
So through the mayor, the reason that I bring this to you for two reasons. I know it sounds like it's a relatively small item. I bring it to the school committee because anytime the landscape of a building that you control changes, you should at least be aware of it, even in a small way. But the second reason I bring it is because I want you to know, you deal with so many things that are sometimes mundane and sometimes even sad. You make decisions that have great repercussions over a long period of time. Sometimes the decisions are very hard. I want you to know even the smallest things that we do for kids, and that your principals are doing for kids, and that your teachers are doing for kids, and that the communities do for kids, that sometimes go unnoticed and unspoken about. I think it's important to bring it to the table. I think it's important for you to know about it, because a lot of it's your good work as well. And these people were very excited to come here tonight to tell you about this project. And whether or not you want to take a formal vote is up to you, or if you just want to nod your heads and say, fine, go ahead and do it. But I thought you'd want to hear it.
Mrs. Metropolis, Mrs. Alfanos, thank you very much. This is really wonderful. I don't think we need a vote, but
No.
I think we're all unanimously in support of this terrific initiative, so thank you. Mrs. Dunn, did you have a comment, or?
Yes, I am thrilled that you're doing this, and I'd like to ask if the superintendent could encourage the other principals at the other schools to do something like this, because it really would help those children who just haven't got that, that oomph to barge into a game, or, they just need to be asked. And it's really such a thoughtful, kind gesture for all the students to learn about it. I think we should have it at every elementary school.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Thank you again. It's terrific. Thank you.
And with that, Mr. Mayor, I am done, except to say that if you need help writing the summary of my evaluation, I'm available.
We do have a couple of written communications to be received. You have them in front of you. One is from District Attorney Blodgett, Superintendent Levine, and Police Chief Tom Griffin, as well as our high school principal, Eric Buckley. It's a letter sent to our parents and guardians regarding the upcoming prom and graduation season. And the second written communication is a scholarship notice from the Italian Community Center of Greater Lynn.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Dunn?
Oops, thank you. Would it be okay if we read one or two lines from D.A. Blodgett's letter? I know that people who watch our meetings may not be familiar with this, and I don't think it should just be limited to the parents of the high school students. It's a good time of year, but the reason that this letter is going home is to try to prevent horrific accidents, and also to inform people that underage drinking, I'm going to read it if that's okay. Underage drinking may result in significant legal and social consequences for students and their parents. It is a crime to furnish alcohol to underage guests in your home or on other property you control, even if you supervise them. Even if you allow an underage person to bring or drink alcohol into your home, you can be criminally prosecuted and might also be sued civilly for harm to your guests or injuries that they cause to others. This is a very timely letter. It's a very important message, and you see it every year, and adults will say, I didn't know the law, and they really should. They're responsible for knowing it, and I applaud the district attorney and you, Dr. Levine, along with Principal Buckley and Chief Griffin. Sending this home is a great way to let people know their liabilities and their responsibilities. I think we ought to publish it in the newspaper, to be perfectly honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. And now subcommittee reports. Education Subcommittee, anything to report, Mr. Hockman?
The only thing I'd like to report is that we have a meeting scheduled for Thursday, June 9 at 4 p.m., and we'll be meeting in the Higgins Conference Room.
Thank you. Finance, nothing to report from Mrs. Carpenter at this time. School safety, we'll hold off on that till the next meeting. Athletics and wellness, Mr. Rosignol?
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Quality and standards, Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I don't know if everyone received an email today. These policies...
Motion to receive.
Thank you. These policies were discussed last week at our Quality and Standards Subcommittee meeting, And the majority of these policies are merely to update our policy manual. So they are presented to you this evening for the first reading, and they are coming to you with the recommendation of the subcommittee as definite policies that we should approve as a full committee. Thank you to my colleagues for helping me to pass these out. The first one is the drug-free workplace policy, and this is required by the Drug-Free Workplace Act. We need to place this into our policy manual. So I would like to make a motion to approve file GBEC, Drug-Free Workplace Policy, for your approval and for inclusion into our policy manual as a first reading. So moved.
Great. Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Olympio. Any comments? Hearing none. Roll call vote, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Hockman, did you have a comment or question?
Thank you. Just a quick question through you to Ms. Dunn. So we'll get a second reading on these at our next school committee meeting? Okay, thank you.
Nope, thank you. So it will be roll call on approval, first reading of the drug-free workplace policy.
Yes.
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 Thank you. The next policy is teaching about alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. If you look at the policy before you, everything in this policy is identical to what we already have in our policy manual, with the exception of the final paragraph. This policy shall be posted on the district's website, and notice shall be provided to all students and parents in accordance with state law. Additionally, the district shall file a copy of this policy with DESE in accordance with law in a manner requested by DESE. That is the only change. Again, this is just an update to policy to keep it current. So I will make a motion to approve file IHA and B, teaching about alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, for first reading and for inclusion in our policy manual. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Amico. A first reading for teaching about alcohol, drugs, and tobacco and drugs. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you. The third policy in this packet is file JICH, alcohol, tobacco, and drug use by students prohibited. This policy, again, is identical to one that is currently in our policy manual. The update, again, is the final paragraph. This policy shall be posted on the district's website, and notice shall be provided to all students and parents of this policy in accordance with state law. Additionally, the district shall file a copy of this policy with DESE in accordance with law in a manner requested by DESE. That is the only addition, and again, it is just to update this policy. So I'd like to make a motion that file JICH, alcohol, tobacco, and drug use by students prohibited, be accepted and approved as a first reading. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Olympio, for approval for first reading for policy alcohol, tobacco, and drug use by students prohibited. Roll call vote, please.
I did have one question, if I can, again, and I'm sorry. Ms. Dunn, so the last two policy on teaching about alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, and alcohol, tobacco, and drug use by students prohibited, the only change you're saying is this last paragraph, which is, and I assume that that's come down from the state?
Yes.
So since that's the only change and it's really not substantive, can we suspend rules and just take these right to a second reading?
Actually, we probably could. I will be honest, I do not know if the legal references have changed. Offhand, I'd have to look at my notes. I think that the cleaner way to do it will be to just insert this, because then we'll be redating these.
Whatever your will is. Okay, thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you. I'm going to skip the fundraising policy. If you could go just a couple pages further in this packet. It's file JKAA, Physical Restraint of Students. This policy actually is different than the one we presently have in our policy manual. This policy is required by law, and our district has been conforming to this requirement since last year. So actually, by voting on this, we are just codifying what is already taking place in the district under the new laws. And this will definitely be replacing file JKAA in our policy manual. It is recommended that we pass this. MASC has done this too, again, to update our own manuals. And in conversations with Dr. Levine at our subcommittee meeting, he explained that the district has already been following this policy based upon the code, the Massachusetts Code of Regulations, as well as best practices. So this is, again, a recommendation, and I will make a motion that file JKAA, Physical Restraint of Students, be accepted and approved for first reading this evening. So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. You've heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Amico for approval on first reading of policy Physical Restraint of Students. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Then I'm just going to ask you to back up a couple of pages. This was prepared by Dr. Levine, and the subcommittee approved this and recommends that we pass this as a committee. This is concerning faculty and employee fundraising, specifically online fundraising. The fundraising world has changed greatly since our policies were put into place, and this is addressing a new form of fundraising. It is in line with our fundraising policies that are presently on record, but it specifically addresses the use of the internet. We have an addendum to policy JJE, and then we have a form for our faculty employees to use. This is not very different from our current policy where any fundraising needs to be approved by the building principal and eventually by the superintendent. We have done this in the past for any of our PTOs and booster groups and other types of fundraising, but this one is to assist the staff with fundraising online. So the recommendation of the subcommittee was that this be brought forward, and with your approval, that it would be added to our policy manual. So I will make a motion to approve the addendum to policy JJE, faculty employee fundraising, for this evening for a first reading. So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. You've heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Olympio, for approval on first reading for addendum to policy JJE, faculty employee fundraising. On the motion, Mr. Rosignol.
Thank you. Through the chair, just one question. In one of the lines it says that the principal will be accountable for the monies collected. So they will have access to whatever account the employee has set up as oversight?
Through the chair. That is the intention. The intention is to make sure that there's a second pair of eyes. Some of these websites, as Mrs. Dunn knows, have raised significant thousands of dollars. We want to make sure that we don't have any doubt that everything's going into the right place and doing the right things. But we do want to know, you know that whenever there are websites like this that mean well, there are other websites that are evil. And we don't want our people getting involved in things that are evil and where we're going to lose all our money or it's going to be stolen from us. Another pair of eyes would be helpful, and that's what that is meant to do.
Perfect. That was, I wanted to make sure that there was always going to be a second set of eyes on any fundraising that we're looking to do. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rosignol. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the intent of this the addendum to this policy that Dr. Levine, I think, drafted and was discussed at the subcommittee meeting. I think it goes beyond what your intent is. It talks about any employee of the school district before engaging in any fundraising activity. I think what your intent is for any fundraising activity that's associated with Peabody Public Schools. It's not a prohibition on their ability to raise funds for maybe a family member who's ill or something like that.
Yeah, through the chair, that's exactly right. You're right. I don't intend to, nor do I think I have the authority to limit their scope of being able to do things outside of their employment of the Peabody Public Schools.
I would agree with that, Dr. Levine. So I think that we need to modify some of this language to curtail the authority of this board in terms of what we can permit or prohibit our staff and employees from doing. And we can go forward with the first reading. I don't know how you want to do that, and I can work on some. I'm happy to have a conversation with Dr. Levine or Ms. Dunn in terms of some language to address the concern that I have.
Through the chair, I think that what you just said is very simple language that could be added, and that is that this is meant to be only associated with fundraising that has anything to do with the Peabody Public Schools and your employment in it. We could add something like that. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that. I do think I control most of the world, but not all of it.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mrs. Dunn?
And in the superintendent's defense, he did put into the addendum that the school committee recognizes easy access to social media has given rise to many opportunities for employees of the school district to raise money for a myriad of worthy causes for our schools and children. So right there, you have set out some parameters, and we could tighten up the language a bit, but I do think the intention is there, and it's clear that we're not trying to dictate anything outside of anyone's employment, but that this is limited to fundraising on behalf of the schools. It also goes into our general fundraising policy, which dictates, again, that is fundraising for the schools, and it also tells about how items that are donated to the schools become the school property. And those things are delineated in the policy manual, and where it's an addendum, it does fit well with that.
And through the chair, I think at the subcommittee meeting, Mrs. Dunn, I think you asked me to add the cross-references to those policies, and I have done so. We updated that today. It didn't get to you yet, but it will. So I'll have that as well in the updated policy that I submit.
Thank you. And that would be all completed, along with these others as well, for that second reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Miko?
Through the chair to Dr. Levine and Mrs. Dunn, I just want to thank you for working on this because, as we know, there is money out there, and people want to donate, and they want to do it in the right manner, and it is coming back to our kids in our classrooms, and our children will benefit from it. So thank you very much for working on this. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you. Just a bit of background. To make sure that we were doing the right thing and that we were protecting not only the school district but also our employees, we also conversed with the Ethics Commission on how fundraising can take place and what the limitations are. And this is new territory for them as well. It was interesting to talk with them. So it really is, a new frontier, so to speak. But we'll be in good shape if we put this into place, because people will know exactly what the rules are and what they can do so that they are able to participate in some of those online activities.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. So we do have a roll call vote.
We're voting on the language as it exists now as a first reading?
No, so do we need, I would suggest that the motion would be with those recommended changes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, everybody comfortable with that? I mean, I think those suggestions were good.
And this is a first reading, which leaves us the chance to finalize it before the second reading.
Great.
Yes.
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 Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then just a vote to include the permission to fundraise form, which is included with this. So I will make a motion that we, motion to approve and accept that for a first reading as well. So moved.
Second.
You've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Olympio. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 And that's it. Thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn, for that report. Liaison to City Council and Advisory Boards. Anything, Mrs. Dunn?
Nothing on the city council yet, still waiting for a meeting with the council members, but Parent Advisory Board, that meeting took place last night, and it was a very, very informative meeting, very lively meeting. Mr. Miko and Mr. Olympio were there, along with members of the Parent Advisory Board from the various schools. And the items that were discussed last night, and Dr. Levine, I will be coming in to see you because we have a lot of issues and questions we'd like to have answered for the parents. Give me 1 second. One of the things that was brought up, let's see. There were quite a few questions on cafeteria, and parents would like to know about the they'd like to do something about making sure that there is proper courtesy between the students and the staff during lunchtime. And they also were wondering, there were several questions about lunchtime monitoring duties, exactly which areas of the cafeteria are monitored and how various issues are handled during the lunchtime. They were curious on the procedures for the distribution of milk because there have been instances of some sour milk at some of the schools. They also discussed posting the agenda online. The agenda for our school committee meetings, if that could be placed on our webpage. They also asked, let's see, the before and after school program. Parents were concerned about the timing of when they will find out exactly which schools will have a before and after school program. And the reason for that was their understanding was if there aren't enough students participating in a before school program, that school may not have that program available. And they were concerned about having enough time to be able to make arrangements for their student for, pick up and drop off. So they were hoping we could give them some information on dates. Also, they spoke about the start times. Oh.
If I may, through the chair.
Sure.
Because that's a very important issue that's timely. When we start talking about what a before school program would look like, I don't see any change in the after school programs, by the way. I think when we start talking about what a before school program would look like, my expectation is that rather than rush this, I believe that our target date should be somewhere around October to November 1st. I don't think that we should start these before school programs with the opening of school, even though I know parents would like us to. I think that we need to make sure that we know what we're doing before we set out to open these programs. I will be working very closely with FKO over the early part of the summer to try to establish the procedures and how we're going to run a program, what it's going to look like, and try to do some surveys from parents, try to get a feel for the schools that are most likely to open in the fall with an early morning program and then go from there. So it's really a good question, and we'll be working on it post-haste as soon as we sign a contract, which we haven't done yet.
Thank you. I do know that my understanding was they were hoping they would know by the end of the school year, and we really did not have any date for.
That will definitely not happen. I would say the earliest would be, through the chair, midsummer.
Okay, and we will relay that back. Okay.
Mr. Rossignol?
Thank you. On that point, and I know that you're looking at having it up and running in October, and then I understand your thought process with that. My fear would be if we don't have those and start having those conversations now, both with parents and with FKO, we might have either A, more need than we expect, and it will be difficult for FKO to staff, or B, less with too much staff. I think those conversations, even if we don't have it up and running for September and start of school, I think those conversations need to happen now, even if it's just FKO having that conversation with their current enrollees' parents to get some sense of, I think that'll help them find where their needs are and at least have a better understanding of how they can staff those needs when appropriate.
Through the chair, after what you said this evening, anything you want, Tom. Those conversations will begin actually Thursday at the leadership table with the principals. So absolutely those conversations will begin to take place. I just don't want to raise anybody's expectations. You know, hopefully we'll have all that information sooner rather than later.
Fair enough.
You're on a roll today. This is great. Mr. Miko.
I might as well speak while getting his good. Through the chair to Dr. Levine, and the only other comment I have on that is with working families, they have to plan, and the sooner we can get that information to them, because once September hits, you know, they've probably already committed to a babysitter or someone who's going to drop off or pick up, so it'd be nice to get that information to them, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Along those lines, one of the suggestions from the parents was to look at the survey just to see what the response was. One of the questions on that survey was, would you be interested in a before-school program? And they thought if we could look at that, it might help. And also, you know, if there were a way of finding out, you know, at the end of the school year, what the interest is, just so people would have some really timely information, because as Mr. Amico said, people were really asking us, because one person actually specifically needed to know so she could make arrangements for September already. It was that pressured to find out as soon as possible. So we wanted to bring it to your attention.
Through the chair. One of the discussions we have to have with FKO is what is their break-even point, not only per school, but if they have 5 schools and some schools are profit-making and some aren't, that's a balance and that's okay. But we have to have that discussion at, you know, what's the break-even point, and we haven't had that discussion yet. So we will. We'll gather all that information and try to get it more quickly than I'm projecting. I just don't want to have false expectations.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. Actually, that is one of the things that we discussed. I brought it up because of my past experience with the before-school programs that we did try to implement that couldn't go forward because the vendor would not have been able to support that program. And we did. I did explain it to the parents, and we did let them know that it's not our decision on. We can say we want this program at all of our schools, but financially, if it's not going to work for the vendor, they're going to come back and inform us of that, and that the school department has no way of imposing a program upon a vendor if they aren't going to be able to be viable. So we did have some good discussion on that, and I think they did understand a bit more about it.
Sorry, through the chair. I'm sorry to belabor this, but it's really important. The other considerations are, do we have enough staff? Do we have the right staff? Are we going to get the people in place for the programs that we need? And I think, Tom, you brought that up. These discussions need to take place. We need to know that if we say we're going to have a program at the center school, that we're going to have the staff to staff that program. We may have enough parents who want to send their children. We may not have enough staff to staff the program. So if there's going to be 5 before-school programs, we know that we need 5 times X number of staff, and we need to make sure that we can satisfy the parents' needs. We don't want a disaster when we open the doors. So that's why we're taking our time for this first go-around.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Levine. In addition to those topics, the parents also spoke about start times and the difficulties with elementary school starting later. So we had a lively discussion on that. And one of the things that we explained to the parents was that you were going to be forming a subcommittee to study the issue of start times. We talked about, the cost of the buses and how we have the 3-tier system and how it's set up presently because that is more economical. Parents did not realize that the money that they pay for buses is not covering the cost of buses. It's really a token, and that if we go to a different type of a system, then there will be associated costs with that. And it also got into a discussion about extending the day and having, more time on learning. So that was a very good discussion as well. One other point that was brought up was the use of student names on student work. There was an understanding that many of the student names on student work would just be either first name, last initial, or, for privacy's sake. And people were wondering, it seemed to vary from school to school. They noticed it at the art exhibit, where some schools only had a student's first name, some had first name, last initial, some had a full name. And it was their understanding that was not in conformance with our policies. So we wanted to bring that to your attention and see if you could check into that and see if everybody is following policy. Okay, thank you. And we will be having a parent advisory board meeting in June. The traditional day would be June 20th. Which is the day before the last day of school. So we may have it on the 13th. I'm going to put it out to the members to see what works best for their schedule with all the end of the year activities. We don't want anybody missing anything. There are some really special times for the students, but we will be having one more meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Building and Grounds, we had a Building and Grounds subcommittee meeting prior to this evening's regular school committee meeting, and I'll be presenting minutes from that meeting at the next meeting. I haven't been able to put everything together. A new business and items for the next agenda will be handled in the regular course. Oh, I'm sorry. New business, Mr. Olympio?
Yeah, just real quick, I just want to thank the Burke PTO. They did a fantastic job over the weekend. It was really a 2-day cleanup. There was a lot of local vendors that also contributed and helped. And there was probably over 100 volunteers over the course of 2 days. So it was a great event, and it was a great community type of event, and they just did a great job, the Burke PTO.
If you haven't been able to drive by, if you could check out the Burke School, it really was. Thank you, Mr. Olympio. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it really was spectacular. Really, there's definitely a difference at the Burke School following the work, and PTO did an outstanding job.
They really did. The photos, they put some photos up online, and it is beautiful.
Okay, items for next agenda handled in the regular course. Thank you for a good meeting, everyone.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.